So, welcome everybody. My name is Tanya Avrith, and I'm so excited to have all of you on our webinar today. A little bit about me, and then I'm going to introduce you to Rebecca, who's going to be hosting our webinar for this morning. My name is Tanya Avrith, and I work at Adobe on the community and evangelism team. I am a teacher. I just joined about 6 months ago at Adobe, and I was teaching high school full-time until very recently. This webinar seems to be a topic that has come up over and over, and we thought it would be a great opportunity to bring my co-host on, and who I'll let introduce herself in just a moment, as she is currently in very much the same reality as all of you. And I'll let her explain. So I'm actually going to let Rebecca kind of take over from here and introduce herself and kind of kick off. And then I'll come back and we'll kind of share what we're going to do for the remainder of our time together this morning.
Great. Thanks. Good morning. Mondays for me are always sort of the scariest day because it's when I check all my students, see who's turned things in, who I need to call. So I don't know where you guys are in the boat with all of that, but Mondays are sort of my worry day. So just about me and my background, I am an industrial designer by trade. So I worked as in a design agency and architecture firm for 10 years as a creative director. And then I went back and got my master's in education, and I've been teaching now. We realized with Tanya the other day for 6 years. So I've taught pre-K. Now I teach high school. I've taught high school for middle school. I basically taught everyone but like third graders. So I have seen the whole gamut of everything. And I teach digital graphics. I have 7 preps this semester. So I teach sculpture, graphic design 1, graphic design 2, photo 2, photo 3. I have independent study students and sculpture 2 and sculpture 1. So it's kind of all over the place. And trying to serve all of these students and create meaningful content and experiences for them in this time has been one of the most difficult. And I go from one day where I'm like, I'm failing as a teacher. I don't know if anyone ever feels like that. You thought you really had hit your stride this semester or this year, and then it's awful. And the next day thinking I'm doing really great work. So I sort of think I found a bit of a formula for success for myself as also a mom of a 10-year-old and a middle school student. So, balancing all the different hats that we're all wearing right now. So that is about me. And I'm excited to share some of my discoveries and hear what you guys have to say.
Do you want to share your screen, Rebecca?
Yeah, should I start on the presentation?
Yeah.
Sure thing. I will start sharing my screen. All right, so I'll put this on. Oh, I have to reload. What on earth? Hide. There we go. Okay, so I'll start up here and present. And Tanya, you'll let me know if something goes wrong or people have a hard time
I'll let you
seeing
know.
Anything. Awesome. Okay, nope. Sorry about that. You present again. This is always so fun. Okay, so
to access
do you want
today's slides,
Yeah.
I'm going to put it in the chat. There's a bit.ly, and if you can see it, it's just bit.ly/reframe Adobe.
Awesome.
And I'll put that in the chat as well.
Great. So that's where all of this is. And I feel like for me, this is a big reframing how I thought about my own school, my class. So our big question today is how might we reframe our digital arts teaching with the tools available? So Tanya, do you want to add anything to this part?
Well, I just want you to see, this is really going to start with the foundations through the lens of current reality. And then we're hoping that we'll leave you with some ideas at the end, some tangible project ideas that, given some of the thoughts that we share, you might find some success in.
Awesome. So quickly, my journey, I teach at a high school. I told you what I teach. My student population is very varied. We are Title I school, and we have kids who are very comfortable economically and a lot of kids who their families struggle. And so we serve all of those kids, I think, beautifully. I'm really proud of my district. And at the very start of this, we thought we were going to be gone for 2 weeks like everybody else. and they issued Chromebooks home. And so it's just immediately every kid got a Chromebook, which was amazing and it was great. But it was also really challenging because everything I teach requires either like a kiln or it requires a proper computer that can run professional design software that we've been learning all semester. So I had to really reframe what I thought was important. And so for me, what I changed the way I thought about was my typical class model. We spent a lot of time doing tool learning. We would start, I would embed in how they learned the programs of Illustrator and Photoshop, InDesign, into these beautifully crafted projects where they were learning the tool and also really developing their design and creative learning. And I felt like I had gotten to a point where I was really making a difference in these kids as creative thinkers and building their capacity to learn complex real world tools and have that ability to learn them, to relearn new tools, and to let go of that fear of complicated tools. So I got really excited with what was happening. And then with this new distance learning model, I've switched and I feel like my tool learning should be very, very low. And my main focus is on developing their design and creativity learning. So with that, I've focused mostly with my digital graphics students on working with Spark because they can access it on the Chromebooks. It really is very intuitive. And we focus mostly on the design and creative process. That graphic showed up. All right, so my formula for success with this is the tool learning time should be less than the creative exploration. Then I also have to add in my realistic expectations for my students because a lot of my students are taking care of three or four other siblings. Their parents are on the front lines working in grocery stores or in hospitals, delivering things. And so they also found themselves in a role of a parent. They're scared, they feel alone. And so the expectations had to completely change. And so for me to give my students success, despite the reality constraints, I felt like tools have to go aside because we've tried all sorts of things. What's most intuitive, how I can maximize them on creative exploration and blend that with what's a realistic expectation for them to create. So for me, I had to figure out what was enough for kids to have successful completion of a project. And that's what you see right here. So, and then how can I design it in such a way that my students who want to do more can do a whole lot more and still feel really engaged in the creative process. But we're still just focusing this part on that creative exploration, on developing design skills, on developing craftsmanship and their creative eye and their vision for their work. So this is how I've thought through this. My students, that one's not popping up. Students with little time or energy can be successful on any one of my projects with probably about an hour's worth of work. I always put in a few different videos to have them watch, to inspire them. I do a really quick tutorial myself, and then they can get to work right away and turn things in and be very successful. My kids with a little bit more time can actually play in the space. They can have a lot of fun with a project and so on and so forth. I also have kids here who have a lot of time and energy. They are using this time to really explore creatively. So sometimes they're blending other tools in. They have a computer, so they're working in Photoshop, or they're working in Illustrator, or they're taking their own photographs, or I have a few kids also using Adobe Fresco and doing original drawings. And so they'll blend those into the projects as well. So I really wanted to make sure I was differentiating not just for my types of learners and for their 504 plans and for their IEPs, but also for their mental wellness right now and their ability to be present in the projects. Does anybody have any questions right now, Tanya?
Not yet, but but feel free to ask any questions. Go ahead. If you have, just put them in the chat.
Yes, please do, because I just have this like whole screen, so I'm like talking just to my computer all by myself here.
We can see you and the screen, just so you know.
Oh, great. So my weekly workflow is like this. I'm at the bottom and my students are up at the top. And I think that my students every Monday receive a new project and they get their feedback from me from last week. So that's why I said earlier on, this is my very stressful day. because I go through and check every kid. What projects had they turned in that they hadn't turned in? I'm emailing all of them. I'm calling home when it's been a long time since I've heard from somebody. So that's my Monday, and they get their new project that day. So everything comes out Monday by 8:30 in the morning. And then Tuesday, they have time to work and answer questions. They respond to my feedback sometimes. I always ask them how they feel about the projects. I talk to them about what's going on in their lives. I spent probably most of my time just trying to connect with my students and connecting with them. Wednesday, they receive an email from me asking if they need help, or sometimes like a fun meme or just something to kind of connect again. And sometimes I'll meet with a kid virtually for a couple of minutes, or I'll make my own. Since we're asynchronous, we don't have actual official classes. I'll make tutorials specifically for kids who are struggling. That usually happens by Wednesday. Thursday, they have time to work and get help, and the due date's on Friday. A lot of my kids get their work done over the weekend, so I don't really check anything until Monday, and my district is not taking away late, like points for anything turned in late. So anything they turn in, they get to turn in. So for me, Monday is my insane day. I spend the next few days just trying to connect with students, connect with colleagues. I spend the whole week figuring out what my next project is going to be for my kids. I try to think what I can pull in from my actual curriculum design, what things can I have parallels in, and what things do I kind of have to invent that's totally new. Because I went from having hours with my kids every week to having a much smaller amount of time expected they're going to be on task with me. And so Friday, I'm still checking emails. So you can see this is what all my little gentle reminders, they always start off with like, hey, how are you? I miss you. I hope that you're doing well. And that, for me, for my kids, I want them to know that this is not so much about turning the work in to get a grade. It's about feedback. It's about them continuing to be creative people. And I want them to feel like no matter what tool they have in front of them, what life gives them, they can be powerfully creative and build that confidence inside of themselves to be creators no matter what. So that's my big focus in all my communication with them too. All right, so in my assignments, each of my assignments includes a responsive and intuitive tech tool. So I was talking with Tanya about this, and people will say Adobe Spark is easy, and it's not. It's responsive. It's so intuitive. If kids can learn Snapchat, they can learn Adobe Spark in half the amount of time that they use to learn Snapchat. It's incredibly responsive, and it lets my artists change things so quickly that it would take a lot longer in our professional design software to do. So I feel like this is my time to build their capacity and their critical eye for their work. And so I'm having them work in a higher volume than we used to. So you can see my student work is multiple ideas, a big higher volume. And the idea is to build a critical eye. And the time that they're spending is on creating a high volume, reflection, feedback, and that iterative process. So that's my big focus on all of my assignments. And so here is a little preview into one of my assignments. So I gave my kids 2 weeks ago 3 book cover designs with Adobe Spark. So I found these great videos that were professional designers talking about what they're looking for with book covers. And then I made my own tutorial. So I'll go through all the objectives. So I gave them objectives, why, steps, and requirements. I gave them really short resources. Most students won't watch anything that's more than 4 or 5 minutes long. And if I give them 3 of those, that's 15 minutes. So that's about how much that they're actually going to watch. And I want everything to be that hook to spark them, to make them really excited. And then I make a tutorial myself. And my tutorials are very different than a lot of tutorials that we give kids. It's like, here's how you do step by step by step to get exactly the right thing. I show them how I think through the project and how I will change things. So it's just not a how-to, but this is what I consider. This is what artists consider. These are things to keep in mind. This is how you can change something. And so it takes me a few different iterations of that to get it right, because I have to do all my own projects then, and then I have to do them in 4 minutes really quickly to show how we're thinking through things. Because again, my students will not watch anything that's longer than about 4 minutes long. So here are some examples of their work. And so I gave them 3 book cover designs. 2 of them had to be a normal book that they thought should have been redesigned. And then 1 was the book that they would write right now. I always try to include some sort of a personal component for my kids in this time, some way to really express how they're feeling. And so we have the quarantine diaries, the places I could be, I love quarantining, and the question of fate. And I have, 50 more, really, really fun ones. But they really loved doing this because we could focus on the quality of the work and they didn't have to worry about like how to add text. Everything was so intuitive. So I feel like I'm actually at this phase in the semester doing a better job building them on their quality of work and pushing them to do better work. Tanya, did you want to say anything about these?
Oh, I just was. First of all, I love them. I think this is such a great fun project. But I was when I saw the quarantining one, it really got me thinking about like how much critical thinking had to go into creating that one because when you use Spark, and you're using the icon feature, you have to find the right keyword in order to find the right icon. So this was actually like a very complex visual because the creator, the artist who created this had to go through in their mind all the different keywords that they needed to think about in order to make this visual reality. So I often like when I look at these, and also because like I know the thinking process that would go into creating it. These don't have to be they it's definitely yes simpler to use, but the process of design is not necessarily less complex. I think that if anything, they can really definitely add like a lot more iterative, like a lot more iterations, and really focus on aesthetics and design. And I think that there's something really powerful about that. And this is a great opportunity to do that. So I love these. I thought this was such a great idea.
It was so fun. And, you know, Lainey redesigned this too as well afterwards. Because the next phase of my project, because I also have kids who are doing this, but they're also doing a whole lot more. So I have some kids who are running their own independent projects. I'm just giving them feedback because they have the time and energy to do it. So my week 2 that I've fallen into with this is we do 1 week where we do a project. I think doing this again, I would probably add a few more. Different variations. I thought 3 was the right amount, but I think that they could have done more. I think they would have enjoyed it. Week 2 instead is about getting feedback. And again, going through that whole design process. And this is something sometimes I really struggle in my own class to get time in to do. So I was happy to sit and explore this. So you can see this is Ella, who is one of my students who she used Adobe Fresco for the background. So that's not a photograph. That's all her own illustration that she made. So she's someone who and like I'm making sure that gets like all that extra support to push herself even further. She got feedback from 3 people. I had it in a form and then they could choose whomever they wanted to. So a lot of times it was parents or sometimes they FaceTimed with friends. And then based on her feedback, you have like her reflection questions. So she recorded all of her feedback and then I asked them to redesign 2 covers. So I love what she says is like it felt good to show my work because they were complimentary, gave me good ideas as well. And that's what we want kids to think about is we show our work to people because it's that's the process of as an artist to exhibit your work, to share it with people. We don't have performances the way that other artists do, the performing arts do. So this is our performance. And so she changed it and I think that she actually made it better. So you know, you can read on the screen, you probably have been like she thinks she needed to play around with the text and the author names. She did another one with Wonder, which is really great, but she's been, I was just really proud of these reflections. So all of my kids, I don't care so much about like what happens from one to the other. I want to see what they think about it and go into that deeper level 4 thinking of really reflecting on their work. So, my lessons that I've learned from this time, is that to keep the tech frustration really low. When we were in the lab, I felt so confident as a teacher to go in and model for my kids how you learn complicated software. And it was never me pointing and clicking for them. It was, okay, you're frustrated. That's normal. How would you find this? And so modeling that thinking to make them really independent on their own. And that was really my focus. And I thought I did a nice job at it. Now since we're asynchronous, I can't be with them at 1 o'clock in the morning when they decide to do this project. And right now their frustrations are high everywhere else. So I don't need to load that on anymore. Keep the creative controls for kids really high. I think I at the very beginning of this journey, I gave them really specific tutorials to make a thing because I thought it would be really great. I thought they'd be excited about it. And I realized that they wanted more creative control. And when something's supposed to look right and theirs don't, that creates another level of frustration. And so instead, I find that the tutorials that are, hey, here's how I would start. Here's how I would look for things. Oh, I don't know if this is great, but I can go to the design wheel and change this and just show them how you model that thinking. I feel like my quality of my work's gotten much better in their frustration. I get fewer emails, they're more excited. And I always include an option for student expression. And my job now is feedback and connection with my kids. So I'm spending all my time saying, that was so great. Why did you choose that? Hey, it could be really cool to do this. Could you resend this in this color? Have you shared this with somebody else? And that's where all my time is spent. So I'm going to pass this on to Tanya. Tanya, do you want to share your screen?
Let's stay where you are, if that's okay with you. Well,
yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I'll just kind of, yeah. So, right now on Chromebooks, in terms of creation tools, you have access to Spark. And depending on the model of your Chromebook, which we're going to talk about after when Brian pops back on, you also have access to Lightroom. So I just wanted to kind of clarify like what is accessible for your students on Chrome right now. You can change the slide. So I wanted to leave you with some project ideas as well. Last year I taught a class called Personal Branding and Digital Communication, which was a combination course around graphic design, photography, filmmaking, very much like it was a mandatory class for all students to take at the school I was teaching at to graduate. So it kind of was a modern take on like an old-fashioned computer and technology class, but I really focused on essential skills that really were skill-based. So I wanted kids to really build a foundation on how to create, thinking about design and aesthetics. And so I wasn't necessarily teaching them, the graphic arts class, but I was using Spark in my class as a foundation to get them to really think about those skills and how they built those skills. And so I actually, can you click on where it says manifesto project? Maybe I should have actually done this myself, but so what I did is this was a unit that I did with my students. And I've shared it with you. You can force a copy when you just go to File on a doc and you can force the copy. You just make a copy and you can modify it. But this was a hyperdoc that I created for the unit. And so each part basically was like, let's say a day, and then the creation maybe was another week. And but I wanted to kind of leave you with some ideas and like a structure if you were interested, because I know that you're super overwhelmed and it's nice sometimes to get some ideas that you can kind of modify and kind of like make your own. So I wanted to make sure that I left you with some of those. And these were just some samples of student work. And if you go to the compilation, that I had 3 trimesters, but I wanted to just leave you with some exemplars because I find with students, it often helps for them to see what's possible. Without obviously, when it's scaffolded well, without copying themselves. So these were some examples of student reflections and some of their manifestos that they made. And this was when I would, at the end of the trimester, I have the kids do a design thinking activity where we really evaluate what worked, what didn't work, and how could we improve in the class. The students really loved this assignment. It was a lot about self-exploration, and it gave them really an opportunity to really think about the things that mattered most to them. And I feel like this could be such a great project, especially given everything happening right now in the world, to kind of just, center and really think about what matters most. So that's one idea that I share with you. Can you click on the next one? The other one was, since I taught a class on personal branding, I spent a lot of time with my students teaching them about, personal branding, right? How to develop out their own look and feel, their own aesthetic. And one of my favorite activities to do with them is to get them to create their own logo. And you might have already done this. You might have already had them create a logo. It would be interesting, to get them to perhaps even go back and do iterations, multiples. So this was a lesson actually that I recently did. I've been teaching an online course with kids at Adobe. So parents, I kind of relieve them 2 hours a week. I was teaching this class, and this was how I designed this remote learning class, very basic. I used a slide deck, and I was able to just kind of get them, I walked them through like some foundations around design, and then I had them create multiple iterations. And I actually get this from Rebecca. Rebecca always talks about, having kids create not just one example, but like create a few, get feedback, and then go and create more. And that video that's shared at the very beginning of this lesson, if you just scroll up, the art of logo design. It's such a great resource. It's only a few minutes. It's slide 4, but it's the same thing. It talks a lot about iterative process, and it's really, really good. The kids, it really resonates with them. So this is a fun lesson that I've done, and then I get them to share them out in a collage on a Google slide shared. So they each get one slide, and they pull in and create like a collage of all of their logos, and then ultimately they decide which logo they want to use to create their personal brand. And if you just click on the next slide. So another project that I do within the same unit, and by the way, if you click on where it says personal branding, right on that part there, where it says personal portfolios, I have them create these like really cool branded stories. This is a unit that honestly could take you to the end of the school year. I share the whole unit with you, but each day I basically scaffold some activities that I'm working on. You might want to make this your own. This is something I did face to face. It was a blended class, but just to kind of show you how I structured it out, because it was so blended, I created it as a website for my students. And so I teach them about how to create logos. We analyze what makes a good logo. We look at color and font, and then I, provide them some resources. So there's all these mini little assignments within this unit that you might find helpful, and I share examples with you. And this is how I teach the kids, and I get them to, then share their learning. And then each day it builds, and so they look at creating a logo. And if you go to day so then as it progresses, they then get into storytelling, and we look at, we then move it over to Adobe Page, and the students start to create a personal story, a personal narrative. And this is after they've done the manifesto. This is like kind of a culminating assignment. But I walk them through the process, and you have all of my scaffolding and all of my resources here that you're more than welcome to use if this was something you wanted to create. But ultimately, these are some of the exemplars. If you go to Savannah's example, this was her art journey. I love this assignment. She's blended video and the graphics in Adobe Page. And the video is so beautiful. I encourage you, when you have a moment, to go through it and watch it. But it's basically just going through her journey as an artist, where she's talking about, it wasn't that she was born an artist. It was with hard work and dedication that she became the artist that so many people see. And it was over time that she's grown. And I just love that message of her journey as an artist. So I thought that's such a great activity for students to be able to do, to be able to showcase their journeys as artists. If they have access to some of their artwork from when they were younger, now is such a great opportunity for them to document that and to showcase it as a project that could be so powerful. And this other one is Savannah's. This is more of a personal story, because I let them choose a personal story that they wanted to tell. And this was about her grandfather who saved Jews during the Holocaust in their basement. And she interviewed him and documented his life. And I thought, what a great activity to do, especially now when you're home with your family. I mean, obviously I give kids choice because it's not always, optional, but this was really a powerful story for her to be able to tell. Um, and then she interviewed her grandfather, so I mean they could do a Zoom interview and record it if they have access, of course. Obviously this is all dependent on what's accessible for your learners. And keep in mind, obviously, we spent a lot of time working through formative assessment, iterative process, a lot of feedback, but they were able to kind of create these personal stories. If you go to the next page, I want to just point out that you can take Spark a lot further than I think people realize. You have the ability to create personal brands, meaning you can change the aesthetic in Spark. And that's just like when you go in under brands, you're able to, like, that's why I always start with the kids to get them to create logos, because then they upload their logo and they're able to create a whole look and feel for their work afterwards. And so this lends itself so well as you go back next year to have the kids be able to have a portfolio perhaps that's branded, that they then can pull in their Illustrator work, their Photoshop work, their photography. It really is a great opportunity now to kind of take a second, reevaluate what you have access to, but it doesn't mean it's lessening what you're doing. It just means that you're pivoting and reframing it so that the focus now is still on things that are valuable. It's still valuable learning, but just using it a different tool to facilitate that. And then when things go back to normal, you go back to, taking it further through Photoshop, or taking their learning further through Illustrator, and, maybe even pulling in some of the work they created in Spark and modifying it, and seeing how they can redo it and take it further once they're back at school next year. So if you could go to the next slide. Is there anything you wanted to add, Rebecca?
Yeah, I would love to jump into Spark real quick and show
Sure.
everyone what my favorite things are as a teacher. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So this, it was so funny because I went to design school, obviously. And how do I escape out of there? We go. I went to design school and spent all this time learning how to use like maybe to make a logo would take me such a long time in Illustrator. And that's my I realized as a student as well. And then opened up Spark for the first time and was like, I basically like could do everything now in like 3 minutes, which it would used to take me like 10 hours to do. So again, like Spark is really great for iteration. So we kind of like lean into that a little bit. So I'm already logged into Spark. We just log in, where we have an enterprise account, so I can create a project. So I have some of my brands up there, but I'm going to go ahead and just say I'm going to create a flyer. For my kids, sometimes like this is how I kind of take them through things. So if I say I'm going to create a flyer, I love this also because Spark gives you like little bits and things to think about. It opens up and it has all of these different kinds of templates. This is one way to do it. You can go in and choose your templates on one side, and so you see you can create from that template. So what's really cool is that let's just create from this template right now. So what I love about it is I can create from a template, but once I put my content in there, so if I add my own photographs, I change the text up, I can keep changing through templates, and I see how my communication, my thinking, the things I want to share, how it looks different. And what we have with, with students of this age and so many different ages is, you have to really think about who your audience is. So for my students, I'll have them make multiple iterations of things and be like, okay, great. So who's your audience? What are they going to resonate to? And we'll print them off and share them with people. But as a designer, so if I click on this, I can click on, and what's going to happen, I want to change, I double click. And so we're just going to say, I'm going to write my name here. Okay, done. So now it's changed to Rebecca Hare. I can now really easily resize this whole thing just by dragging this up, and anything that's connected to it's going to resize as well. And the thing that makes me so excited is, okay, we can go a little bit more in detail here with line spacing and letter spacing. I can also go to my style. So this design, this style knob is what completely changed my world. Now I can go through and say, okay, what does it look like this? To actually do this ordinarily would take you such a long time to click, select, change backgrounds, add shapes in, and now you have almost like indefinite styles that you can change things through. And all of a sudden I can actually decide like what is looking better, what do I like? And my kids can create so many different versions of things. So I'll stop at something that I actually really like. And then, so the style wheel is the first thing that's really great. And let's get to a style that we can do this with that's pretty fun. So that's fun. And then my effects are the other thing that's pretty amazing. So text effects, really simply, I can say cut out, and it's actually going to cut my text out, but I don't think you can see it in this one. It'll cut the text out from the background. I can add a shadow really quickly. So all of a sudden, just by clicking things, I can change all aspects of my design. And I can change, I've got my current colors, I can switch them up, I can actually, but I can also go into detail and really change things very specifically. So it's incredibly sophisticated, but also very intuitive. I can change my type, and then I can add things in as well. So if I want to change my background, what's really great, if I want to add this and make it, instead of a cloud, make it something else, all I have to do is click on it, double click on it, and it says find free photos. So I can, instead of Arial, I can see all these photos that I can use. But if I want to use my own photos, I just have to click back from here and say upload photo. So I can also connect it to Lightroom, to Dropbox, and my Google Photos as well. So a lot of my students work directly from their Google Photos. So my own photo students are actually using Spark all the time to create mood boards, to create presentations for their projects that they plan to make. I've kind of incorporated into all aspects of my teaching at this point. So that's my favorite thing. Yeah.
Bristol has a really good question. Does Spark have
Yeah.
a workflow with other Adobe tools like Illustrator or Photoshop? I.e., can you export from either of those to Spark?
When you cannot import things, you can import them as images. As far as I know right now, when you download them, you can choose PNG, JPEG, or PDF. So really, if you're going to be bringing things into Spark, it's going to be as an image. It's not going to have its editable layers. Spark is sort of its own beast in that. But what's neat is it does automatically save. And since, if you have students who have limited amount of time, they're jumping off, I go back over to my posts, and it saves it automatically for me, and I have it. And for my students, what I have them do is I just created this post right now, the three little dots up in the top corner. I say duplicate. Rebecca trial 2. And all of a sudden now I have that first original one, and I can make a new iteration. I haven't lost any of the stuff I added to it, but I haven't also lost my previous example.
I'm so glad you showed that, because when I have the kids creating logos, that's exactly what I'll have them do. I say that don't once you have something, like stop, make a duplication, go again, stop, and they love it. They have so much fun doing this because they see their work getting better and better and better. And then we are able to look at their work and have a conversation about what is working. Why is that font actually work better? Why is that color pop more? Like, those questions are the things. Why is the spacing so important? Like, because if you saw the manifestos, those did not look like that when they started. Let me tell you something. Those did not look like those when they started. We had a lot of feedback. I don't let kids turn anything in until they were ready to publish it for the world to see, period. Like, if you're not ready to post that on the internet and like let your friends see it, it is not ready to go. And so, we talk a lot about, we look at exemplars. I do a single point rubric with my students, because I don't want to have them create 5 lines and have 6 images. It's really, and it's all standards aligned. In my case, I was using the ISTE standards because my class was a media class. So it was very much like we were looking at aesthetics and design. So design elements were key. And we had a lot of conversation about what makes design work. And we studied, I do a lesson called Friends Don't Let Friends Use Word Art. And I explicitly teach them skills around that. So we talk about white space. We talk about using a grid. We look at having visual breathing room. These are skills. there's a language that we're using, right? And you guys get that, you teach that also. So those are the things that I'm looking for in my evaluations. So I want, when in a single point rubric, I tell them to go back in and look at what are the things that are working, like what works well, and what do you think needs more improvement. They self-evaluate, we go through it, I show them skills that I can develop. So I'll go into the tool, that's when I give them very specific tool feedback, and then they go and they do another iteration. And when they're ready to publish is when they are done.
So for me right now, our district, and I don't know what your policies are, but we are basically like credit, no credit, as far as kids turning in assignments. So I'm not going through and like doing any kind of detailed assessment. I'm giving detailed feedback. So I go into every time somebody turns something in, I have them do the reflection questions in Google Classroom. That's what we're using as a private comment. And then I can comment to them and say, oh, I see how you did that. Like, and I start trying to start a dialogue with them like I would in class. So through the comments inside of Google is how I'm creating that, connection with my kids, because we with the asynchronous aspect to the teaching. And then if they did what was required, they get all the points. That's a district policy. So for me, the evaluation, in that case, I'm not attaching rubrics at this point because it's more of a checklist. And I get to shift my focus the way it's like, great, they turned it in. Did they meet the requirements? Now I get to communicate with them. Oh, why did you choose that photograph? If you were to do it again, what would you do differently?
So I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for anyone who has any questions to, oh, here we go, Becky. So Becky actually said, Becky said, Crystal, here, because my classes are CTE and geared towards Adobe software certifications, I have to balance the integration of other tools the students won't be certified in. Do you foresee Spark entering the realm of certification? Funny you ask. And then you can import from Creative. So this is what Becky said. Becky, hi Becky. Becky's online. Becky Hagan, who is your account person. I never know what to call you, Becky. She's the best. Becky is the best. So she's on the call, and she says you can import from from Creative Cloud libraries or from Lightroom when you're in Adobe Spark. Okay, cool. Thanks for pointing that out, Becky. It's good to get that clarification. And there's good conversations going on in the chat. So please feel free to leave any questions on the side. And you mentioned something about Spark entering the realm of certification. I know Ben Forda is on the call as well, and I just want to make sure that I'm not giving any bad information. But in terms of, and feel free, Ben, to chime in if I'm misquoted. But I think in terms of certification, I don't know that there is like a Certiport certification for Spark. It's at Adobe for students. For teachers, we're in the process of creating Adobe Creative Educator certifications that are going to be ready in July. Actually, Rebecca is working on that project as well. So from a teacher perspective, we will have these certifications. They're not just Spark related, but they're around like creativity and creative expression and teaching as young creators. But for students, I'm not sure. However, it is a good idea, right, Ben? Don't you think? That sounds like an awesome thing to be able to have for kids. So I'm sure Ben's smiling. That's something that I think we've kind of spoken about. But Ben, go ahead. Oh, Ben, I think I've blocked you. Hold on, let me make sure that you can talk. There you go. Go ahead, Ben.
We don't have anything for students right now. Adobe does have a more formal certification program that Tanya mentioned, the Certiport, but it's not really that well suited for students and younger users. It's very much around skills that you might want to show on your resume later on or prove that you've learned top products, and they're very product focused. It's, I've taken the course on InDesign or Premiere or Photoshop, and it's less around specific creative skills. So we do have an experiment going on with what credentialing and micro-credentialing badging would look like that would be a lot more student-friendly. No time frame for that yet, not even a commitment yet, but it is something we are looking into, and what the right platforms are and how you do it safely and where the badges get displayed and what that means for younger users. So work in progress, and if you guys do have opinions about that, we'd like to hear them.
Well, I'm
Yeah,
going
I
to
would ask.
stop.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Jamil wrote that. And did I pronounce your name right, Jamil? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. That sometimes because of this, because of what's going on, some kids' work is more creative than it ever has been. And I would say, and I would love to see in comments, what everyone else has experienced in this, that, my students were really fortunate because they all got Chromebooks. A lot of kids, didn't have any device, and we really fought, and we've been out delivering for kids who don't have internet access. Like, just the accessibility piece has been the most important thing. But for these kids, that I'm giving them these challenges and photos, and like having this connection has been kind of really amazing to see, from knowing the quality of their work at the beginning of the semester to seeing the stuff that they're kind of pulling out right now with it, just knowing that they just have to turn something in, and something sort of shifted inside of them. And, my focus has always been on giving really quality feedback. And it's not about the end product, it's about their creative process. But I've seen kids in this situation be like, I'm on more than one occasion emailing and just saying, I'm really happy to have this class right now. It's the only thing that I look forward to every week. And so I take that on as, how can I create the most exciting, the most interesting thing that will be something memorable for them in a year and 10 years. That maybe, like, when I think about, if someone's going to come up to me when we can hug again, and, kids come up to the end of the year and they give you that hug and they say, thank you for something. I was like, what is it that I want them to thank me for? And it's not going to be thanks for, giving me that tutorial or giving me that grade. It's going to be thanks for letting me realize I can do really complex things. Thanks for letting me find a way in the worst circumstance to create things that are beautiful and meaningful. So I start every project going, what would that thank you be if I got one? and then kind of backwards designing from there, because right now the wellness and the social emotional issues with our kids is really is paramount. And I think that when we can take the stress away from the tech, then we're able to really allow their creativity to kind of flourish.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching. Click the link in the description below to explore more free online professional development, and click the link on screen to subscribe to the channel for more videos.